This is episode 121 of Decoding Fox News, and I'm your host, Juliet Jeske. Each week, I watch and analyze. This past week, it was 16 hours of Fox News, and then break it down. I watch all the Fox News you'd never want to. Let's get into it. Fox begins to pivot to attacking Kamala Harris while celebrating Scotus coronating King Trump.
About the moment that we're in right now. Yeah. Typically, we would be talking about the president and just his celebration with his family, seeing the fireworks, him inviting service members to the White House. It would be a pretty calm day. Everybody's eating barbecue. No one wants to hear about politics, but it's different now. I mean, the president's campaign is in trouble right now. Look, I've said it very clearly. I don't think the president is going to get out because the only person that can decide to enforce him out is himself.
Right.
And he doesn't look like he wants to leave this. Also, Kamala Harris is still on the table. And so when you look at the polling numbers, do Democrats do better with Kamala Harris? Not really. And so all roads lead to Joe. But the fact that we're having this conversation on the 4th of July, I know a lot of Democrats would prefer to be talking about barbecue.
Yeah.
So I started this project in February 2022, which means this past week was the third January 4th special I've watched on Fox News. And yes, I watch them. I also watch the New Year's Eve specials. I watch every single second of them because every now and then I'll get a clip from them. I don't get much. It's mostly they sit around. They maybe talk to some veterans. They talk to people who run charities for veterans around the country. They might do a couple little historical things. They show pictures of people's kids all over the country decked out in red, white, and blue. They show fireworks, which are incredibly boring on television, but we do it. And then more than one network does the fireworks on television. I'm always just like baffled by it. Like, okay, fireworks on television, but okay. And then that's it. They might have some musical guests on. This year was the first time I saw several segments dedicated to politics, which I was kind of shocked by because they haven't done this before. And it was all President Joe Biden should drop out of the race. President Joe Biden should drop out of the race. President Joe Biden should drop out of the race, which is what I just played you. And even in that clip, the reason why I used that clip is even Lawrence Jones is saying, we don't want to be talking about this right now. We'd rather have enjoying barbecue. We'd rather not be talking about politics. And I'm just like shaking my head on my end going, oh, I can't believe this. So that's what they've been doing since the debate. Not shocking. Last week, episode 120, it was even more dire because it was right after the debate and pretty much everything I had to choose from was them just piling on, but in a surprisingly somber tone. This week, they've decided to sort of shift briefly to Kamala Harris. So they're starting to direct more of their criticism, more of their attacks, more of their how dare she, we'll get to that, Kamala Harris. So if you're new to the podcast, I just briefly want to say, the Project 2025, it was an analysis of the various groups that were considered on the advisory board of that project. And I published what is basically a research document. My background before I got into journalism was as a researcher, even though I was an amateur researcher. So that's what I really love doing. And what I did is I went through the entire list and I started investigating every single group. I was originally just going to publish it with hyperlinks so the reader could go to every single group. And I said, no, go deeper. And then I couldn't stop. And it took over a few days of my life. I published it, not thinking anything of it. I actually thought I was going to get the criticism that it was too long. I decided to open up the top third to all readers, not just paid subscribers, because I really wanted people to see it. It has exceeded every single previous record I had on Decoding Fox News 5 times and more, meaning it's 5 times bigger than the top performing article I've ever published. It is enormous. So as a result, I might have a lot of new listeners right now. I'm going to briefly explain what this podcast is about, what my project is about. Decoding Fox News was formed with one of the professors at my school at the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism at CUNY, where I graduated in 2001. He gave me a grant. I went on a grant for 18 months, and then it turned into crowdsourced, which is very challenging, which I currently am 100% crowdsourced, meaning it's just subscribers and Patreon supporters and no donor, nothing like that. So, and it was meant to be for the friends, families, neighbors, loved ones, coworkers of Fox fanatics. I don't think I can decode or de-radicalize someone who's deeply entrenched in Fox News, but I'm here to help those of you who are surrounded by Fox viewers. I'm here to help you from getting sucked in. I'm here to help you navigate the craziness that you might hear from your relatives and friends. I'm here to arm you with information. That is the point. I'm also not a pundit, so don't expect me to go on and on and on about my own political beliefs here. I try not to do that. I try to view myself as a researcher and journalist. I also want to briefly point out to the few hundred new potential listeners right now that there is a newsletter version of this podcast. This week, I don't have that many hyperlinks in it, but some weeks when there's a lot of research, I could have maybe 50, I'm not kidding, hyperlinks throughout the document. So if you want to check my sources while you're listening, after you're listening, feel free to go to the newsletter, which is also free to anyone. It's the weekly newsletter, the weekly podcast will always be free to anyone who wants to read it, anyone who wants to listen. It will not be behind a paywall. So that's a weekly event. So you will also get the newsletter first, and then usually right after the newsletter, you get a link, an email to the podcast. Some people listen to both. Some people only consume the podcast. Some people only consume the newsletter. So when I refer to the newsletter, that's what I'm talking about. So we'll get into it finally. Just wanted to sort of explain, because there was such a huge boost in membership that I kind of need to explain myself a little bit so people aren't confused. So here we go. Fox begins to pivot to attacking Kamala Harris while celebrating Scotus coronating King Trump. Last week on Fox, the network spent nearly half its airtime trashing President Biden by either saying he should drop out of the race, demanding that he should resign immediately, or inventing scenarios where his troubled son oversaw the nuclear codes. Other topics included rejoicing over the Supreme Court's ruling in Trump's immunity case and trashing Vice President Harris. The network took some time off to celebrate Independence Day, but still took time to criticize Biden in between musical guests, photos of toddlers in patriotic outfits, and elaborate fireworks displays. Anyone watching Fox exclusively last week might not have realized that both France and the UK just held elections, or that the Israel-Hamas war is dangerously escalating on Israel's northern border. Shows I covered last week: Fox and Friends, The Five, Jesse Watters Primetime, and the Independence Day Special. So the first clip is from Stephen Miller. That's Stephen Miller, Mr. I think family separations at the southern border are a brilliant idea, Stephen Miller. This is from Friday. It was on Jesse Watters Primetime because it was a holiday week. Everything was subbed out, so nobody normal was hosting their shows. It was just a big shuffle of Fox hosts and B-listers and that sort of thing. So they had Stephen Miller on, and he's sort of laying the groundwork, which no matter what happens with the Biden nomination situation, which Biden might stay stay the nominee for the entire course. He might be replaced. I don't know. I'm not advocating for anything here. I'm just explaining. Kamala Harris would be the obvious choice, and she's the vice president. But this is Stephen Miller. This is how I predict Fox is going to continue to attack her, regardless of what happens. And that now she's not just the vice president that they've been making fun of since she was inaugurated in, 2021, but they are going to go a next step further and say that she's part of a vast conspiracy.
To your point, it's the conspiracy. Who's running the country and who's been covering this up? One thing we know for sure is that Kamala Harris is at the beating heart of this conspiracy. As the vice president, she is the one who had the highest responsibility to alert the public and invoke the 25th Amendment. And in interview after interview for 4 years, she has lied about his mental state. She has a weekly lunch with him. She's at his side. She needs to be hauled in front of Congress immediately to answer questions. What did Kamala know?
Yes.
When did she know it? And why did she lie to us all?
You've been inside a White House, Stephen. What do you make of the green light? What do you make of all of a sudden now the conspiracy is over? Now everyone is allowed to tell the truth.
It really is the most remarkable media moment in our lifetimes. Because let's be very clear, the media was part of the conspiracy for 4 years. They covered it up, they lied, and every time Donald Trump or others pointed it out, they said it's fake, it's disinformation. We obviously saw just a few days ago this nonsense about cheap fakes. They were part of it, but that debate was such a soul-crushing moment for the ruling class and the establishment. They believed that just like the State of the Union, they could pump them full of drugs and get them like 30 minutes, sort of 35, 40 minutes, enough that they could lie to us again. And like I said, when Trump KO'd him right in the first round, and Biden was just a mumbling, bumbling, stumbling, incoherent, slack-jawed, glassy-eyed mess, that ended. And now everyone is saying the truth. But it doesn't matter because we still don't know who was behind the conspiracy, why they lied to us for so long, who is running the country today, and what the hell we're going to do when we have not only Joe Biden is incompetent, but Kamala Harris is part of the conspiracy.
So again, I think he said it like 3 or 4 times. Kamala Harris is part of the conspiracy. So that in his world, in Fox News world, discredits her. She cannot become the nominee because she was part of this vast conspiracy. It's laughable. So he's basically saying that she, just on her own, she alone, at some point during the past, 3.5 years, should have just been like, that's it. He's in cognitive decline. I, sole vice president. No one will suspect that I'm doing this for my own good, right? Nobody will suspect that I'm doing this for my own attempt to grab power, but I'm going to declare that this man is cognitively declined and he cannot be president. Ha ha! I'm the hero. I mean, come on. How would that play out? It's not like what happened with Trump when an angry mob said, hang Mike Pence, and he's just sitting around in the, dining room of the White House like, doo-doo-doo, watching it on Fox. It's not that. Trump openly, publicly threw his vice president under the bus, threw him in front of a mob of angry people and was like, it's his fault. It's his fault. I'm not, that Biden is going to win the election. It's his fault, basically, is what Trump did. That's not what happened here. Stephen Miller's actually expecting Kamala Harris to, make this completely insane leap and attack her president. Come on. That's ridiculous. I also just want to take this brief moment to make fun of Stephen Miller because he, if you're going to make fun of anybody, Stephen Miller, that's the one you make fun of. But there's a character in a movie, I think it's Anchorman, where one of the characters says, I can't control the volume of my voice. And that's Stephen Miller. Like everything is just screamed the whole time. Like, I'm so mad and Trump is my hero and he is the greatest president in the United States of America and I love him and he's the greatest and I'm mad and I'm Stephen Miller. And he, by the way, is not a lawyer. I was very clear to put that in all caps and then bold it on the 2025 Project article that I just published because he's not a lawyer. He's in this thing called America First Legal, which is on the list for Project 2025 as an advisor. He's not a lawyer. He doesn't have any legal training. He has like a BA, I think, in political science. I don't really care, but it's not law. And he's on this like legal group. Whatever, Stephen Miller. So next up, we ramp it up even to a more absurd level with Will Cain, also from Friday, same show, Jesse Watters Primetime. He had a woman on from the Heritage Foundation, a woman named Victoria Coates, and they're talking about the brewing crisis again regarding Biden and will he, hold on to this nomination? Will he be replaced? Here we go.
Only have like a minute left here, Victoria, but I guess I'm just kind of curious about the mechanics. The phone rings in the middle of the night. There's an international crisis, or it doesn't even have to be the middle of the night, as can be clear. It could just be after dinner. And Joe can't make a quick decision. So who runs the American response to an international crisis?
That's what we're all very concerned about. I guess right now it's Dr. Jill or it's Hunter Biden, and I never saw this with President Trump. He was always available for us, and this is deeply dangerous for the American people. Hunter Biden
is making the call on decisions that could end up in world or nuclear war. Hunter Biden. Rest easy, America, and have a happy Independence Day.
What on earth are you talking about? Okay, I just went, come on. Okay, so when Trump was president, Jared Kushner, the husband of Ivanka Trump, Trump's daughter, actually worked in the White House, actually had a position, they had an office, worked in the White House. They weren't paid, but they worked in the White House. They profited greatly from this position. He was making deals all over the world, in the Middle East, very, very, very shady stuff. Got a $1 billion loan situation. It's actually at least, I'm not going to waste time on that, but yes, he got bailed out in a huge real estate disaster that he'd caused himself. He was bailed out by Qatar, a foreign country. A lot of shady stuff happened with Jared Kushner. Now, the reason why they were able to try to act as if Hunter Biden is now working in the White House, which he's never worked in the White House. He's never had any position or role in his father's government when his father was in his father's job, basically, when his father was senator or when his father was vice president or now that his father is president. Hunter Biden has never been involved, never had any sort of government position. But the reason why they're pulling that is that right after the debate, Joe Biden met with his family, and apparently they hung around for a couple days and were keen to protecting Joe Biden. That's it. To say that Hunter Biden had the nuclear codes is just shut your mouth. Just stop making stuff up. But it's going to get worse. Last week was sort of dour. This week is okay, the crazy has been amped up and now I can make fun of it. This is Mark Thiessen. He's a conservative columnist over at Washington Post. This is from Tuesday, also Jesse Watters Primetime. And he goes to some strange places, again, about this prospect of Biden being replaced.
Worked in the Trump White House. We had a fair share of leaks in the Trump White House, but nothing like this. This torrent of leaks we've seen today. Is this indicative of something going on? The pressure's real?
Well, I think what's an indicative is they're panicking, but they're running around like chickens without a head. They don't have a solution to their problem because they can't remove Joe Biden. Because I mean, number one, they can't get past the Kamala Harris problem. The party of identity politics is not going to replace her. She's next in line. The party of identity politics is not going to click the first black woman vice president to the curb and replace her with a white male. So there's no Josh Shapiro, there's no Gavin Newsom. None of these guys are going to get the nomination over Kamala Harris, and she's less popular than he is. His RCP average is 39, hers is 36. And she probably doesn't want him to leave the ticket because if he wins, she becomes president because there's no way he's going to serve 4 years. So she's going to become, if she stays on the ticket, this ticket stays intact, she becomes president.
So he starts off kind of normal. Again, it goes after Kamala Harris. This is the new trend on Fox. We can't just bash Biden. We got to somehow lump Kamala in, demonize Kamala, make her into this, this evil demon. And now he goes right off the rails with where he pivots here.
The second problem they have is, what's the alternative? I mean, put aside if they could get past the Kamala Harris problem. Why is Joe Biden president right now? Because there was no other alternative in 2020. Everybody else failed. And so and Bernie Sanders was heading towards the nomination. And so they all panicked and said, OK, let's put old, moderate, genial Joe Biden on the ticket and he'll be our Trojan horse to get into the White House.
So I take umbrage with what he just said there regarding Bernie Sanders on the road to the nomination. That is not true. If you look at the actual data, Bernie essentially tied for Iowa. There's some debate over that, but essentially tied for Iowa. He squeaked out a win in New Hampshire. It was a narrow win. He did solidly win Nevada. By the time they got to South Carolina, it was over because Biden won it. But if you looked at the polls, and I did because I wasn't a Bernie Sanders supporter, I'm not going to bash Bernie Sanders. If you love him, that's great. I'm just saying, as someone who was, I'm not going to say which candidate I supported, but I was watching those polls like a hawk, and Biden was doing a lot better than people realized. A lot better. He was definitely expected to win South Carolina and expected to win states after that. So once he got the momentum, it was over. And if you go back and look at who won what state, you can see it. So I would definitely disagree with him on that. Then Thiessen also implies that he was put in there by the Democratic Party, not by the voters of this country. And I strongly disagree. The voters of this country chose Joe Biden. He gets even crazier.
There's no better field right now. And do you think Bernie Sanders is going to sit back and say, yeah, let's nominate Josh Harris, let's put a nice moderate on the ticket? The Democratic Socialists are going to try to nominate their own person. There's going to be a Democratic civil war if they release the ticket. Bernie Sanders might run again, or he might nominate AOC. The Squad is going to want to have a say in this. This is the Democratic Party. It's not the party of Bill Clinton anymore. So I think there's a lot more complicated elements to this.
There is absolutely no evidence that this is going to happen. Zero, zilch, none, nada, zip. What we're actually seeing is multiple members of the Squad endorsing Joe Biden. Bernie Sanders has made absolutely no move. What we're seeing is there is a bit of a revolt. There are some Democratic elected officials who have said openly, publicly, that they want Joe Biden to step down. There has not been another person stepping up and saying, that's it, I'm going to assume this nomination, or I'm going to challenge you for the nomination. That's not happening. That's not happening. And there's no sign that the Democratic Socialists are going to do some sort of revolt. I think people know that this is just, the stakes are far too high because we're facing Trump and we're facing Project 2025. I also briefly want to say, people keep criticizing the press for what's going on right now with the nonstop Biden coverage regarding the nomination. I will add that people seem to forget, people who keep saying it's the press, it's the press, it's the press, that right after the debate, more than one Democratic lawmaker came out and said he should resign, or he should pull out of the nomination. He should let Kamala take over, let somebody else take over. So it's kind of which came first, the chicken or the egg. They're both doing it. So to just say that's the press, I don't think that's accurate. I also will say, as someone who's not going to be pushing my own beliefs here, however you feel about this situation, because people have very strong opinions, this is what I would suggest doing. Contact your senators, contact your rep if they're Democrats, tell them what you think. Contact your governor if they're Democrat, tell them what you think. If you're pro-Biden, tell them that. If you're Biden should step down, tell them that. Getting in fights with people on the internet is kind of pointless. So trust me, I have people come at me all day long. I mute them, I block them, I don't care. If you want to actually add your name, get your stuff out there, push your agenda, contact your elected officials and let them know how you feel. Contact the Biden campaign and let them know how you feel. Donate money if you want, or tell them, look, I don't think he should be running. Do that. I'm not picking a side here. I'm just saying, be proactive, get out there. This is a democracy. Be active. Don't scream at people on the internet. Just my 2 cents. If you want to scream at people on the internet, okay, but it might be better directed at MAGA people and at Trump. I'm just saying. The infighting is breaking me. It's breaking me right in half. So moving on, here's a ray of light here. I should very quickly, because I'm about midway through, give a shout out to my sponsor. And who might that sponsor be? That sponsor are the listeners of this podcast and the readers of my newsletter. If you'd like to become a paid supporter to Decoding Fox News, my subscriptions start at $5 a month. Paid subscribers and paid supporters get exclusive content. You can also go to my Patreon for Decoding Fox News or Substack for Decoding Fox News. If you can't afford to become a financial backer, you can share the podcast, share the newsletter. That helps tremendously. I know my Project 2025 article has been shared, I don't know how many times, several hundred on Substack. So it definitely helps. It definitely helps. So that's it. Moving on, we have a ray of light, and this is Richard Fowler, who is a gay black man. I love him. He's one of my favorite liberals on the 5. Jessica Tarloff is still on maternity leave. So Richard Fowler, sitting in on the 5, he stands up for Kamala Harris in the best way possible. And this is from Wednesday on the 5. If you hear any rustling, that's the mascots to the podcast, Odin and Thor, running around my tiny apartment. I live in 450 square feet in Brooklyn.
Richard, she is polling better than Biden against Trump in a CNN poll. Are Democrats just racist, or are they misogynist, or are they, what are they? I'm just curious.
Hold on a second. Now, Judge, I do like you a lot, but I have to disagree with you. I think after that debate we saw on Thursday, Kamala Harris did ABC, NBC, CBS.
PCP.
Hold on, let's not be rude. But what we saw was she didn't jumble her words at all. She was actually very artful in her defense of the defense of the president.
Quite the bar.
And I think she was so artful that when CNN just did the poll that Joey talked about, she is not only within striking distance, she's in a statistical tie with former President Trump. And listen, I do think that the media gives her a rough deal. I don't know why that is, but let's talk about what she has done since she's been the vice president, because the media doesn't talk about it enough. When she became the vice president, there was only three states in the United States that extended postpartum Medicaid coverage past 12 months to women. Because of Kamala's work, now 46 states extend postpartum coverage.
How come I'm not hearing that from her?
Because the media is not reporting it. And she said it a number of times. She said it when she sat down with Sherry Shepard. She said it when she sat down with Mav Carter. She said it and she says it in all of her interviews. The media is not covering that. Beyond that, she's been one of the leading voices and leading the effort to counterbalance China in how they're influencing the developing world. China has spent millions of dollars in the continent of Africa. Kamala Harris has been the sharp edge in America's foreign policy in countering that. She's invested.
Are you serious?
I'm very serious. I could tell you about her record directly. She's delivered over $100 million in aid to Africa. She's been on a trip.
What about America?
Yeah.
But that's part. If we're going to counterbalance
How about
China,
the border?
if we're going to counterbalance China, we do that by how we do our foreign and how we do our foreign policy. She's been the leading edge. She's been leading.
Well, Greg, if Richard's right, obviously
right.
Kamala.
I love that subtle, if Richard's right, I am right. It's at the very end of that clip. Richard Fowler just goes, I am right. It's very, boom. He's getting better at dealing with them. He's my favorite besides Jessica Tarloff in that chair. They always have a liberal chair. Sometimes when they get really desperate, they'll stick another conservative in the chair, and it's just the worst. I'm not a fan of the Five. I realize it's the most popular cable news show, which still blows my mind. It beats everything. That goofy show at 5 p.m. You know, boomers are watching it because it's the only people who are at home at 5 p.m. Boomers and people like me who research it. But the Five is this hugely popular. And when they put another conservative in that chair, the show is just painfully boring. It's the worst thing ever. So Richard Fowler standing up there for Kamala Harris, I thought that was excellent. That's why I included it. And again, she's becoming the new target. Now, this next, we're going to pivot to the Scotus immunity case, which basically gives any president more leeway to do things. And as long as they're in their official capacity, they can't be criminally prosecuted, which is incredibly problematic. I'm laughing to keep from crying at that one. I've seen, constitutional expert, one after the other, just go off about this case and how troubling it is. So this is Katie Pavlich. This is a very brief clip from Fox and Friends on Tuesday, saying something with absolutely no irony. This is repeated quite a bit on Fox News. They have no shame. They have no self-awareness.
The current president, a Democrat, continuing this attack on the legitimacy of the Supreme Court so they can ultimately pack the Supreme Court with people who are rubber stamp their agenda.
And I forgot to say this before I played this clip, if you're new to the podcast, I do goofy voices and I have recurring bits. Like a 1930s radio show. I don't know. Like a 1930s radio show. But anyway, that could be a new voice. Anyway, when somebody on Fox freaks out about something that Republicans have been doing forever, I call that a clutch your pearls, clutch them tightly to your collarbone and just grip them. Oh, my dear stars, what are you saying? What are you saying? Somebody might pack the Supreme Court. Never ever heard something. Okay, so that's a clutch your pearls bit. I do them often. So anyway, you probably remember that in March 2016, then Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell also blocked Obama from nominating a justice in his last year in office when McConnell claimed the nomination was too close to the next presidential election, and it was like several months away. In late September 2020, during Trump's presidency, McConnell raised no objection when Trump nominated Amy Coney Barrett to the court less than 2 months before a presidential election. McConnell actually helped speed the whole process up and fast track it 30 days later, she was confirmed by the Senate and sworn in a week before American voters chose Biden over Trump. The mindset of McConnell was basically like, we should let the American people decide. We're too close to an election. And then he does that. So, yes, there are some Americans who do question the legitimacy of the court, and shenanigans like that are why. Also, it's very, I mean, they don't even hide it. The Republicans are definitely openly bragging about stacking the court. Trump has said it countless times during rallies and speeches. Next, we have Speaker Mike Johnson, who makes an absolutely absurd comment about the same ruling. This is Monday, and this is, again, also in Jesse Watters' primetime.
I have no idea. Look, there's all sorts of hyperbole tonight and just this fantastical, these hypotheticals they've made up. Future presidents are going to turn into assassins and all the rest. It's madness. Listen, remember this. The president and the vice president are the only two offices in our constitutional system that are elected by all the people. No one who is elected to that office is going to be prone to this kind of crazy criminal activity. What the court is saying here follows common sense and, of course, our Constitution as well. You have to have the president with the ability to make difficult decisions hourly, daily, and not be worried about rogue prosecutors going after them at some point in the future.
So he's basically saying there, and his logic makes absolutely no sense, that since the president is elected by all the people in a national vote, that therefore they'll act more decently or something, that they wouldn't dare do. That doesn't make any sense. How many examples do you want in history? So any human in a position of power can act unethically, persecute their political enemies, collect bribes for favors, sell national secrets, commit acts of espionage, fleece the treasury, abuse or oppress entire nations regardless of how they were elected. History has provided far too many examples of leaders abusing their unchecked power. It's absolutely ridiculous. Democracy or not, that can happen. The only advantage to a democracy is it's easier to get rid of these people. When they're dictators, it's a lot harder. So next up, we have another regular on the Decoding Fox News podcast lineup, and that is simply Steve Doocy Goes Rogue! And that's the senior-aged original cast member of Fox and Friends, Steve Doocy, in one of his many moments of going against the grain on Fox News. No one's really sure why he does this. No one knows if he's told to do this by Fox management. We just know that he does this. And this is from Monday. He's also talking about the Supreme Court case.
Well, as you know, Greg, two lower courts did side with Jack Smith. And then the Supreme Court voted, okay, let's take this up. What's different about this is, you know, there's a six conservative justice supermajority, 3 appointed by Donald Trump, deciding this thing that impacts Donald Trump. Although when we heard the oral arguments from the Supreme Court, as Gorsuch said, we're going to decide this for the ages. So it's not really just about Donald Trump. It's about every president after him.
So Steve Doocy has been doing that for at least the past 2 years, where he just sort of unexpectedly goes against the Fox News narrative and is like, that's it. I gotta say. And then he drops his truth bombs or he contradicts his co-host, and that's it. They move on. And they are some of my most popular clips. Whenever I get a Steve Doocy Goes Wrong, I get very excited. The Washington Post, he does this so often, wrote an entire article about this, and they cited me in the article because I was like, I got a whole folder full of Steve Doocy Goes Rogue because they thought it was funny that I would do Zooms. I do Zoom cuts sometimes to show facial reactions on Fox and Friends because they all have an odd relationship, the 3 main hosts. There seems to be some tension between Brian Kilmeade and Steve Doocy. Who knows? I don't really care. I just find it funny. Anyway, but yes, Steve Doocy there, he says that 2 lower courts did side with Jack Smith. He also said that basically that Trump packed the court with 3 justices who then immediately ruled in his favor in this situation. But then he sort of adds kind of a warning that, by the way, this is also going to be applicable to future presidents, and this could harm us in the future, is basically what he says there at the end. Now, this next clip is actually from the PBS NewsHour, and if you are new to the podcast, I'll explain. When I worked on the precursor to what ended up being the Decoding Fox News in grad school, it's basically my thesis, or what we call in my program a capstone. I did a detailed analysis of 3 months of basically right-wing all the way to the most extreme right-wing media. And pretty much about a month into it, I was like, you know what, this isn't really working. I need a control, meaning I needed nonpartisan media to sort of compare the right-wing media to sort of see, like, what are they not telling us? What are the stories they're not giving us? What is the sort of mainstream, middle-of-the-road, nonpartisan media showing us? So I picked PBS because they are partially publicly funded, so they're far more likely to be straight down the road, which I found that is the case, especially with anything political. And then I thought, I also picked this like really kind of lighthearted NBC morning show that's available online. And I picked that because I could get as many episodes, I could just download them. I didn't have to capture them. Anyway, it saved me a lot of time. So I was like, and it was very straight down the middle of the road, very like chipper morning show, news show, not overtly political at all. So I was like, okay, great. And so when I was asked to do Decoding Fox News by a professor at my school and was given this grant that lasted for 18 months, I'm now crowdsourced, I said, I'm going to keep the PBS element in there. And I do think it strengthens the piece. I get asked about it a lot. People are like, why PBS? And I'm like, because it's straight down the middle of the road. And at the time, CNN was veering right wing. And I still don't know what's going on over there at CNN. And I just decided it was a terrible companion to Fox. And I didn't want to do MSNBC because that's partisan to partisan, and that doesn't make any sense. I wanted something that was straight, that was not political. So anyway, as I explained this, I ended up making this 3 clips. I can only include one. But again, this is sort of a preview of what life could be like under Project 2025. At least it's already happening in Oklahoma. So on June 27th, Ryan Walters, the state superintendent for Oklahoma schools, directed all public schools to teach the Bible, including the 10 Commandments, in direct violation of the First Amendment. On July 1st, Walters appeared, that's Monday, on the PBS NewsHour to defend his decision. Stephanie Sy, a PBS News correspondent, asked Walters why he made the decision to mandate the Bible as curriculum in all Oklahoma classrooms. I thought she did a great job with him. He was very combative with her. She remained calm, cool, and collected the entire time. Here's the clip.
Superintendent Walters, the Bible is not banned in any schools. It's allowed to be taught already in Oklahoma schools. And yet your own Constitution says the schools should be open to all children and free from sectarian control. Given the Oklahoma Supreme Court's recent decision against publicly funding a religious charter school, do you think this policy will remain, or are you just making a political point?
Yeah, the left, they can be offended, they can be mad, they can be upset, but what they can't do is they can't rewrite history. We are going to show the countless citations. The Bible was cited more than any other document in the 1600s, 1700s political writings. It is clearly a momentous historical source. We will bring it back to our schools. And look, we will continue to battle. We feel very confident in President Trump's nominees to the U.S. Supreme Court, that if we get sued and we get challenged, we will be victorious, because the Supreme Court justices he appointed actually are originalists that look at the Constitution and not what some left-wing professor said about the Constitution. So we feel very confident in it moving forward and winning every legal case.
So he just openly gave up the game. He's just saying, well, thanks to Trump packing the court, Katie Pavlich, we think we're going to be able to get away with this. Are they? I hope not. I hope not. They're not the only school district that's trying to do this. Louisiana, I believe, tried to force the 10 Commandments in every school. That's already being challenged in court. This will be challenged in court. As Stephanie Sy said in her introductory question to him, there was a move where they tried to make a Catholic charter school publicly funded, and it was deemed unconstitutional by the Oklahoma Supreme Court. So, scary times. They're going to just try to shove Christianity down people's throats. I have zero problems with Christianity. I just think it should be a choice, not state mandated. And I have said this many times on this podcast. I do think the government corrupts religion. Religion corrupts government. They're terrible as a combination. I don't care what religion you pick. Leave religion alone. Government should stay out of it. Religion should stay out of government. Boom. If you want to start a charity, that's great. But, something like that, like, we're going to help feed, hungry people, and we might work with this government agency as long as they're kind of separate and they're doing their thing. Zero problems with that. But the minute the government says, this is the religion everybody should follow this religion, it's going to destroy that religion, and that religion will be corrupted, and that religion will screw up the government. Just don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Anyway, very strong feelings on that one. So before I move on to the last section of the podcast, I'm going to do, because this is another one if you're new, I have impressions that I do from time to time. Sometimes they spontaneously come out of me. Sometimes they don't. This is the most requested one. There's a couple people who don't like it, but I would say you're outnumbered by like hundreds of people who've told me they love this one. So it's just how it is. I always make a joke about Decoding Fox News. If you go to a restaurant, you can order whatever plate of food you want, and you can kind of customize it if you want. When you're producing a media project, everybody's eating off the same plate of food. So kind of, you're all getting the same dish because there's no way I can customize it for, now we're at 10,000 people. Thank you so much. You have no idea. You have no idea. I got about 700 followers in less than a week. It's just been, I don't want to start crying. It's just been tremendous. Thank you so much. Anyway, now I'm crying. Now I'm going to do an impression. Anyway, this is my goofy impression. You'll recognize this woman immediately. She's a Fox News favorite.
I'm Judge Janine, and what I have to say is this 2025 project is nothing to worry about. You know what you should be worried about? That's Hillary Clinton, because the woman is evil, and she's secretly plotting to take over the world. If you don't believe me, just ask my dogs. Stella, she's my favorite. She's a standard poodle and a rescue, by the way. I have other dogs, another one named Doodle, and then Ted and Red. But Stella's my favorite, even though I won't admit it. And that's it. Where's my wine?
Okay, that's Judge Janine. Oh, I blew out my audio. Anyway, moving on to stories Fox News ignored. Every week, I compare the hours I've watched on Fox to 5 hours of the PBS NewsHour. Fox News frequently leaves out major stories, leaving its audience uninformed on top of being manipulated. The following list are some of the stories that PBS covered that Fox News did not. Again, I had to cut some because Fox was, half of their programming was just bashing Biden, so they left out so much, and I couldn't fit it all. So here we go. Updates in the war in Ukraine. The U.S. will provide an additional $2.3 billion in aid for Ukraine, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said last Wednesday during a press conference in Kyiv with Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Orban has shown deference to Russia since the start of the Russian invasion of its neighbor. Russian President Vladimir Putin met with Chinese President Xi Jinping to strengthen mutual support between the two countries. So that's a new meeting they just had. Updates in the Israel-Hamas war. Israel killed a senior Hezbollah commander in southern Lebanon as tensions between Israel and its northern neighbor continue to rise. A group that tracks Israeli settlements reported the largest seizure of land in the occupied West Bank in over 3 decades. Authorities recently approved the appropriation of 12.7 square kilometers, nearly 5 square miles, of land in the Jordan Valley, according to a copy of an order obtained by the Associated Press. Although the current Israeli government approves of these land grabs, they are deemed illegal by most of the international community. 4 people with the Islamic Jihad military group were killed by Israeli forces in the West Bank city of Jenin. The Palestinian Health Ministry said a total of 7 people were killed, but did not specify whether they died in the exchange of fire or the airstrike. Now on to the rest of the news. These are fun ones at the top here. Steve Bannon, a longtime supporter and former advisor to Donald J. Trump, reported to a federal prison in Danbury, Connecticut on Monday to begin a 4-month sentence for defying a congressional subpoena. Bannon defied a subpoena to testify by the now defunct House Select Committee that investigated January 6, 2021. Another one. Rudy Giuliani was disbarred from practicing law in New York State. Giuliani was disciplined for the lies he promoted about Trump's loss in the 2020 presidential election. Voters in Arizona, Nebraska, Missouri, and Arkansas have gathered enough signatures in their respective states to get ballot measures to enshrine abortion rights in those states in the next election. And some of those are being challenged, so we'll see what happens in November. The Kansas Supreme Court struck down state laws that regulated abortion providers more strictly than other healthcare professionals. The court also rejected a ban on a common second trimester procedure. And to decode that a little bit, because whenever they kind of block a ban, it's a little confusing to explain. In both of those cases, reproductive rights were strengthened in Kansas. PBS produced a story about how restrictive abortion laws disproportionately negatively impact Black women. Black women already have a much higher rate of maternal mortality than the general population. The Biden administration proposed new regulations with the goal of protecting millions of workers from the significant health risks of extreme heat. If finalized, the proposed rule would help protect approximately 36 million workers in indoor and outdoor work settings and substantially reduce heat injuries, illnesses, and deaths in the workplace. A federal district court judge temporarily blocked parts of a non-discrimination rule that would have kept insurers and medical professionals from denying hormone therapy, gender transition surgeries, and similar medical care for transgender people. The Wisconsin Supreme Court overturned a ban on ballot drop boxes, so Wisconsin voters can once again drop off absentee ballots via a secure drop box. A new directive from Oklahoma's top educational officials requires all public schools to teach the Bible and the Ten Commandments. I'm actually surprised Fox didn't mention this. This is after the Oklahoma Supreme Court struck down a religious charter school for being unconstitutional. Now, they may have mentioned it on one of the shows I didn't watch. The shows I watched, they didn't mention it. A new law in California will track retail codes to help track gun sales. Laws in Wyoming, Georgia, Iowa, and Tennessee have outlawed the use of retail codes to track gun sales in their states. So California says track the codes. Those 4 states say don't. PBS produced a segment about a 30-year-old case filed by the city of Gary, Indiana over gun violence. The city was once one of many that sued gun makers and sellers. The case is the last active lawsuit of its kind and might finally be resolved. Last Friday, Iranians elected the first reformist president in 20 years, an election with a low turnout. The election was held after the sudden death of Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi in a helicopter crash. A stampede at a Hindu religious event in northern India killed over 100 people, mostly women and children. Officials say heat and suffocation could have played a role in the disaster. A new law in Sweden allows parents to transfer up to 3 months of their paid parental leave to pay grandparents to help take care of their grandchildren. Single parents are allowed to transfer up to 6 months. A pair of new studies show that the $190 billion the federal government gave in pandemic aid for schools helped students catch up academically, with some gaps still remaining. Google is well behind on its goal to become carbon neutral due to the excessive amount of energy new AI technologies use. And that's all the stories that were covered on PBS in 5 hours that Fox didn't cover in 16 hours. Shame on you, Fox. Here we go. Now, by the numbers, the top 5 topics covered by Fox News and PBS, and compare them directly. Starting with Fox, number 1 story, Biden bashing, and most of it was Biden should drop out. That's 47% of airtime. 47% of airtime dedicated to trashing the president. 19% was July 4th celebrations. Scotus immunity case, 8%. Blatant promotion of Trump, 6%. And Kamala Harris bashing, 4%. PBS, 11% was Biden's future as a candidate for president. They also discussed that. That was the number one on PBS, but only 11%. The UK election, 8%, was a major story on PBS, barely mentioned on Fox. They did mention it, but just, like, oh yeah, by the way, there's an election. Phew. Artist Profile, which is a regular on PBS, was 7%. Israel-Hamas war, 7%. And the Scotus immunity case, 7%. That was PBS. Now, I also do a list of words used on Fox News for the week ending July 7th, 2024. This week it was very strange. Biden, 683 mentions. Trump, 317. Kamala, 129. Hunter, 54. Immunity, 52. Obama, 34. Border, 33. Migrant, 15. China, 13. Economy, 13. Inflation, 12. Israel, 6. AOC is an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, 6. And Hillary, 4. Very unusual, very lopsided. Normally it's not just all Biden, but last week was all Biden. And that's the podcast. I'm so tired right now. If you want to check out more of my work, I'm going to have a lot more coming for Project 2025. Some of it's already finished. I just have to sort of clean it up before I actually publish it. There's going to be a lot more coming for paid subscribers and free subscribers. So don't worry. I'm going to go through the whole thing. Another one is, if you'd like to see more of my work, you can go to Twitter, also known as X, Threads, Instagram. I have a Facebook fan page. I'm also on YouTube under my name, Juliet Jeske. I'm on TikTok and Blue Sky. The discussions on Instagram can get pretty funny. I don't post there as often because they have a 90-second limit. But that's it. And if you'd like to become a paid subscriber to Decoding Fox News, you can go to my Substack for Decoding Fox News. Paid supporters can go to my Patreon for Decoding Fox News. Both get exclusive content. And the podcast mascots, Odin and Thor, 2 cats in my tiny one-room apartment, also send their love. You can also find a version of this podcast on the YouTube channel for Resolute Square. Thank you so much for listening. I'm exhausted. I will see you at the next podcast.
Resolute Square.